Hey folks, let's learn something new about the oil and gas industry. You know, every year we talk about the next year's business drivers. So at the very end of 2015, we'll talk about what we think the business drivers will be in 2016. We've done that for a couple of years now. Well, today we're going to talk about something that we think is going to make that list in the future, and it's something called operational excellence. Now, operational excellence is not new, but it is somewhat new to the oil and gas industry. So operational excellence came about on this book that a couple of guys wrote. Michael Tracy and Fred Weiserma wrote a research book that talked about market leaders. And what their research basically came down to is that market leaders in the business world could excel if they concentrate on one of three buckets. The first bucket is product leadership, right? So companies that excel in product leadership will lead the pack. And the company that comes to my mind first is, of course, Apple. They dominate their niche by being the product leaders. The next is customer intimacy. That's another bucket that their research determined could help companies come out on top. When I think customer intimacy, I think of companies like Neiman Marcus or Brooks Brothers. And then finally, operational excellence. Operational excellence, I think, is exemplified best by the company FedEx. Think about what they're able to accomplish, and they do it without a hitch 99.997% of the time. Now, operational excellence was popular discussion in the oil and gas industry in the 90s, and then it kind of disappeared. And it disappeared basically because profits went up, because what people were getting for a barrel of crude oil was out of this world. Well, now it's back, and it's back with a vengeance. And I think we're in the perfect point in history where operational excellence is going to be a major business driver for several reasons. What's going on in the oil and gas industry specifically is you look at what's going on in upstream. We're in a long-term low crude price market, which means the upstream companies have to wring cost out of their processes, right? And they're also doing stuff they've never done before. So they're doing, think of the unconventionals, think of deep water, think of Arctic drilling, high pressure, high temperature. All that together requires operational excellence. And the midstream companies, right? The midstreams are having to rethink capacity and routes. You know, they used to run their pipelines were pretty easy to figure out. They'd run it from somewhere and bring all the oil and gas from the Gulf Coast that was delivered super tankers to the refineries all around the rest of the country. Well, that's almost reversed itself. Now we need to bring oil and gas from the rest of the country down to the Gulf Coast. Once again, a major driver for operational excellence. And then downstream. Downstream's in a unique position. They're being spurred by growth because the cost of their raw feedstock has been cut by 40%. But in the middle of all this growth potential, they're fighting state and federal policy, which is becoming increasingly more complex and require much greater attention to detail to implement. Once again, a driver for operational excellence. And then the service companies. The service companies, quite frankly, are getting beat up by all of their customers to wring cost out, to be able to do more for less. Once again, operational excellence falls right across that. And then on the whole industry is fighting this thing we call the great crew change, which is a lot of senior people with experience are going to retire. And at the same time, there is a shortage of talent in the oil and gas industry. Once again, something that operational excellency will address in oil and gas. So that means that the need for this is huge, and it's going to continue to grow for the next 10 years or so. Now, when I say operational excellence, a lot of people don't understand what I'm talking about. And unfortunately, in the oil and gas industry, because the core of the industry is mainly engineers, when I say operational excellence, they think process excellence. And they're two totally different things, right? Process excellence is a way to wring out inefficiencies in the process. Operational excellence, I think, is best described by Wikipedia. And Wikipedia defines operational excellence by a philosophy of leadership, teamwork, and problem solving, resulting in a continuous improvement throughout the organization by focusing on the needs of the customers, empowering employees, and optimizing existing activities in the process, right? So operational excellence touches the entire organization all the way across, from HR to well completion. Now, OpEx, or operational infancy in oil and gas, is in its infancy, right? Companies are just starting to touch it, just starting to discover it, just starting to explore those routes. Now, a couple of people have already embraced this, and they're on that voyage, right? So if you're a Chevron fan, or if you work at Chevron, you've probably heard the Chevron way. I've been hearing this for years. The Chevron way is basically we're completing every task the right way every time is the focus. That's operational excellence. And big old ship ExxonMobil, you know, they're out there implementing operational excellence, which has allowed them to have a return on their operations 3 or 4 points higher than their competitors, right? This means Exxon can go someplace and either make more money than anybody else can, or in places where other companies can't make money, they can, all because of operational excellence. Now, when you think of operational excellence, it's really a simple thing to figure out how you want to deploy an operational excellence program. It's really just two main parts. Where do you want to take your business? And then number two, building and deploying that roadmap to actually get there. Now, the first thing I rattled off, where do you want to take your business? That sounds simple, but that is a very complex strategy session. You need to look at your entire organization, you need to look at every process in that organization and figure out where those changes need to be made to wring out inefficiencies, to increase efficiencies, to wring out waste, to wring out where you waste time. And that strategy can take quite a while, but you have to do that part first. And that's going to touch every department in the organization, right? Like I said, it's going to touch everything from legal to HS&E, to operations to building maintenance. All of that stuff together has to be looked at as an overwhelming big picture. And then once you figure out where you want to take the business, what is your end game? As Stephen Covey said, begin with the end in mind. The next part is then, once you know where you want to go, is you have to build this roadmap to how to get there. Now that's where it gets much more complex. So the first thing you have to do is, can you visualize your key operating processes? We'll take something like accounts receivable. Can you visualize the moment that you send one of your clients a bill, what it has to go through, what paper trails, what systems does that have to be key punched in until you actually get your money, and what key punching and what paper trails has to go on within your company when you receive that money for you to actually recognize that? What is that process? And that's one process in a company. And you take a large enterprise organization in oil and gas, somebody has multiple business units, you can see the complexity, just that one piece, just visualizing all the operational processes would be. The next thing is, you got to look at the workflows, and you got to figure out where do you want those workflows to be tweaked or changed to improve those operational processes. And then once you have those two things done, you got to figure out what metrics, literally what gauges are you going to use to measure that progress so you know if you're actually moving the needle. Then you got to figure out functionally, how do you operate, right? What parts of your business are key and are most important, and which ones are less important, so you have an order of progression. And then how do you measure those improvements, right? You have to have a systematic way to measure that. And then, and this is part of process excellence that a lot of people miss out on, is you have to drive continuous improvement. So this whole thing that we're building, it doesn't have an end game, right? It's continuously being improved, and it has to be improved by the people that have their feet on the street and the people that have their hands deep in your business, which means your employees have to adopt this culture of operational excellence in oil and gas. And then risk. How do you manage your operational risk? That has to be figured in as well. So once you build and you're able to deploy that roadmap, now you come to the hard part, especially in oil and gas. How do you change the business culture to ensure success with operational excellence? That's a tough one, right? It starts at leadership. Senior leadership has to buy into this lock, stock, and barrel, right? If they don't, this will never be successful. And then change management. You got to figure out your change management process that works for your business, your culture, and your company. And then you got to start thinking about things like high performance work teams. How do you get your people to do more, right? To be more accurate, make less mistakes. There's a process for that. And all of that together is wrapped around performance management. How do you manage the performance of all those pieces? So, and like I said earlier, the biggest thing is do you have your people buy into the philosophy of continuous improvement? That's a hard thing to do. You'll hear it a lot in HS&E and oil and gas, where people say, well, anybody on the line can pull a trigger, stop it, right, from a safety point of view. The reality is that's not really true. What happens is, if you're that guy on the line and you pull that lever, you better have a damn good reason why you did, or you get your chops busted, right? That's not the right way to think about operational excellence. You need to have the key people in the organization being able to stop and reassess the process. Now, I don't mean that means everybody in the organization. You don't want a first-year engineer right out of school to be able to pull the trigger and stop an $85 billion deep water project. But he may have found something that your senior engineers didn't see. So what you want to do is have some type of change matrix in place, right? So that if he needs to change something, the right people can verify it's valid, and then you can go ahead and stop the process. Once again, that needs to be an evolution of continuous improvement. So then you get to the whole process and technologies and methodologies needed for operational excellence. And you can do all that research yourself. A lot of that process stuff you've heard before, Six Sigma, Lean, all that stuff is not in our wheelhouse, but those are the processes that you would bring in to help support operational excellence. Now, I rattled all this stuff off, and we talked about in the beginning on why we think this is a business driver. But let me tell you what else this is. It's also the time and history for this to happen, right? The oil and gas industry is starting to embrace new technology. In fact, it's embracing new technology faster than I've ever seen it happen before. We have new global competition. So because of the NOCs, the nationalized oil companies, big companies like Shell and Exxon and Chevron are running out of places to drill, right? So we're competing in a global way that we've never competed before. Geopolitics is playing a major part in this. One of the things I'm most proud of our industry, if you look at the efficiencies that's being driven in the frac fields because of low crude prices, they figured it out, right? The good guys have figured out that they can actually make money at oil at $50 a barrel, right? They were only making money at 75, 100. So think about how far they had to come in 2 years to be able to do that. We need that to spread out throughout the entire industry. And I think now's the time it's going to happen. So folks, I hope this helped. We will see you next time.